Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome back. Zoya, podcast producer here. What do periodic tables and Google Translators of commercial insurance have in common? This week on the podcast, Matthew speaks to Mike Hobday, CEO of Insurants. Insurants is developed by Antworks in collaboration with Marsh McLennan to help commercial insurance companies manage and process their documents. Mike also discusses the recently patented periodic table function at Insurants used to compound and extract data from multiple elements and sources. If you want to hear more about that and a hint towards an announcement at ITC Vegas, tune in. Well, if you're already not familiar with InsTech and what we do, and that we have a life beyond the podcast, take a look at instech.co to find out what we know and how we can help you. That's pretty much it. Now let's hear what Mike had to say.
Mike, welcome, and really looking forward to talking to you today. Before we kick things off properly, it's always good just to know where people are. So where in the world are you calling in from today?
I am in Royal Leamington Spa up in the Midlands.
For all our overseas listeners, and actually probably our UK listeners as well, why is it called Royal Leamington Spa?
Well, the Prince Regent, so we're going back to the early to mid 1800s, used to come here to take the waters. There was a farmer at the bottom of Leamington, which at the time was a field, alighted upon a spring of water, and being an excellent marketeer of the time, decided it was medicinal and would cure all diseases. And so, a bit like Bath Spa, Leamington grew up as a Georgian holiday resort for the wealthy of London, and they would come here to take the waters and solve all of their ills. And so we were anointed Royal Leamington Spa.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. For all our listeners who are coming to the UK, you've done your bit for your, you may not welcome tourists actually if you're living there, but anyway.
We have Stratford upon Avon down the road, so...
Lovely part of the country as well, so it's highly recommended. But anyway, on with the show. So you use artificial intelligence. We now are starting to use artificial intelligence. So I asked our bot intern, who's been listening to all the podcasts and reading all the content.
Right.
And I asked them, what do we know about insurance? And this is what we got back. So tell me how we're doing in terms of this. So Insurants, developed by Antworks in collaboration with Marsh McLennan, helps commercial insurance companies manage and process their documents. It utilizes intelligent document processing, or IDP, and generative AI capabilities to automate data extraction and processing for various insurance-related documents, including policies, quotes, financial statements, endorsement, binders, slips, and loss run statements. How's that?
I think that's absolutely brilliant. It just goes to show how good Gen AI is in summarizing data, I think. So, yeah, if you ask me, I think I'd say the shorthand version of what we do, that would be smack on.
Brilliant. Well, if anybody wants to hear that, they can go into the InsTech website and ask the question directly, bottom right-hand corner. So, Mike, you're CEO. You worked your way up through insurance since you joined in 2019. I noticed you had 12 years at IBM, General Manager, IBM Automation. I'd love to hear a little bit about what that was before you got into insurance.
Gosh, yes, 12 years. It goes really quickly, doesn't it? So I joined IBM originally to run their banking business here in the UK. And I also looked after Barclays, looked after ABN AMRO, and then went out to run financial services in Asia Pacific. Came back to Europe to establish, what we now know as intelligent automation, to bring, if you like, early AI, Watson as we know it from IBM, together with robotic process automation from the likes of UiPath and Blue Prism in its early days, and built the practice in the UK. And it was through that role as general manager for automation that I came across Antworks and fell in love with the document processing aspect of it.
Wow, that's a strong statement. You fell in love with document processing. I mean, maybe you fell in love with making document processing better, which is what we're going to be talking about.
Oh, that's exactly right. But I think I was struck by the idea that what I was doing with RPA was really automating the movement of data between applications by and large. But I observed that the majority of processes that I was focused on, both in banking and insurance, involved documents. And none of the automation I was doing was really addressing the issues of expensive people with boring work reading documents. And when I saw the early incarnation of the Antworks product back in 2018, I thought, this could unlock automation end to end in often complex processes involving experienced and high-end staff. And that was the original attraction, I think.
And because we like to unpick our acronyms, RPA, robotic processing automation.
You're quite correct. And IDP, intelligent document processing, if it comes up again.
Yeah, well, no, the Gen AI got that. It's already, it kind of knows that we like our acronyms spelt out. So just come back to what you're doing today. So I think one thing everybody agrees on is that the data that's going into insurance companies or coming out of insurance companies is a bit of a mess. Quite a few people offering solutions. If people want to have one thing, and I'll ask you again at the end, to think about, to understand what you're doing at insurance, how should they sort of think about the sort of core of what you're actually offering?
Yeah, well, I think let's focus on what we observe others doing in the marketplace. So our observation was that there are providers who are selling single solutions. So that could be submissions or loss run forms where they've spent considerable time almost like hard coding solutions for those particular problems. I think we've come at it rather differently. We are not focused on individual documents. We're focused on the data that flows between principally brokers and carriers, but other parties too, in the commercial insurance market. And by focusing on the data fields and the data itself, means that we can offer services across the whole life cycle of pre-bind processing in commercial insurance, and with loss runs, for example, going in beyond the bind stage.
So just quickly again, the loss runs, those are where insurers are getting claims documents back or claims spreadsheets.
That's correct. So when you have a policy, a commercial insurance policy, I think something like 95% of commercial insurance policies renew every year. It's just too complicated, too expensive to go through rebroking it. What happens is that you get it looks like it's a really, really clunky document. It's typically a PDF or a Excel spreadsheet. And during the lifetime of a policy, which might be 10, 15 years, with the renewals and endorsements, the loss run records the losses during the course of the run of the policy. And, then that's a term probably more commonly used in the United States.
Great description. And then you talked there passing about fields, and you've created your version of the periodic table, which most people will remember from their days of chemistry. But can you just talk a bit about how you use that idea of the periodic table to link it back into the different fields?
Absolutely. It's probably worth saying something about our relationship with Marsh over the last 5 years. So during that period, we have analyzed and built a series of algorithms using largely traditional AI techniques, machine learning, natural language processing, over that period to basically decode the documents flowing from 475 carriers in North America and across 75 insurance classes, across broadly eight different document types, something like 120 fields. And today we're processing 1 million documents for Marsh each year. So if you were to multiply all of those things together, you'd end up with 4.7 to the power of 13 variants, which gives you an idea about the level of complexity that our AI models have to cope with. So as we started to productize that experience of working with Marsh to offer it to brokers and carriers, both in North America, UK, Europe, and in fact globally, we realized that the something like 1,500 algorithms that we had got actually were about the fields and not really about the documents. And so what we've come to configure, and we've just recently patented, is this idea of the periodic table. Most people will be able to visualize a periodic table in their minds as a broker, for example. Say, I want to read, let's say, Chubb policies in the marine sector, and I want to understand these terms or these risks. Then you could go to our periodic table and choose 3 or 4 elements, which in combination as a compound would then extract that data. And so we found that a really powerful analogy, and we're finding that both carriers and brokers are very excited about it. And the CIO of one of the big brokers recently referred to it as basically the standard data model for North American insurance market. And we think it has great possibilities for enabling the digital flow of data alongside traditional documents. So we see it having great potential, not just in North America, but also here in the UK and Europe.
No, it's such an elegant concept. I mean, it's almost, I suppose, another way of thinking about it, be like a menu, you pay what you eat. And Marsh has got, I mean, they've got a big market share. So what's that roughly of total?
Yes, I would guess it at around about 20% of the market. And if you think we process documents, slips, for example, for them in Asia, but our primary work with them has been in the US and Canada. And obviously, the US and Canada by far is the largest insurance market in the world.
And the documents are processing, I mean, some of these presumably are standardized because of the Accord forms, but I'm guessing some of them are also sort of proprietary, are they? So you
Yeah, so aside from Accord forms, we're talking about policies that may be between 30 and 1,000 pages long. There's nothing standard about those at all. There's commonality between insurance classes and the carrier that they've come from. But we also do binders, loss run forms, which are all very clunky and messy. And we also do comparison of last year's policy, for example, with this year's policy. Very, very important in ensuring that the risks you've agreed with your client, if you're a broker, are actually captured in the new policy. And we also do a comparison of policies to binders as well. So, this is born of 5 years hard work because, and I'm sure Marsh won't mind me saying so, they're very challenging taskmasters. They expect excellence, and that's reflected in the accuracy that we're delivering.
I just want to make sure for those that, again, don't speak insurance, binders and slips. So binders, I think the way you're referring to it is what you might also hear referred to as bordereaux. So essentially that's the often spreadsheets list of business being booked, typically like updated once a month.
So we'll go the missions, binders from the carriers to the broker to define the terms, the policies themselves. And then when the policies are eventually being compared and selected and the data is extracted, going to the back-end systems at the point at which it's bound.
And then slips you mentioned in there, that's essentially the way that the policy conditions are defined. I don't know if it's purely a London market term, but it's basically what goes between the broker and the London insurer or Lloyd's insurer.
Correct, yeah.
Good. And then come back to your accuracy point in there. You didn't give away the punchline on that one. So I know that Marsh have got a really tight requirement for you, a threshold on accuracy, and you've fulfilled that, and you fulfilled it without cheating. Can you just explain what the threshold was and why you're not cheating?
Well, because we're honest folks, it's very important to achieve high levels of accuracy because there's a threshold that the business has in terms of feeling confident about their technology implementation, which is replacing humans. And so the Marsh threshold is 98% accuracy. What that means is we take a sample of 600 documents every month, and to achieve, I think last month was 98.2. So there were 16 errors in 600 documents, which had probably an average page count of 300 to 400 each. And so that gives you a level of accuracy, which I think most of us would say wouldn't be achieved by humans who are having to process documents of that scale on a repetitive basis. I think it's also worth saying the way in which we've operated has all been focused about raising confidence in the accuracy of our solutions so that the client can move to straight through processing. If you're confident you're getting 98% accuracy, then maybe you don't even need to have humans look at it at all. So what we've done with Marsh as part of an approach to improve adoption and confidence is instead of using our own UI, we use the UI of the client Marsh. And so staff in the middle back office would be looking at the system that they're comfortable with, but instead of having to fill in the data being pre-populated by our insurance solutions. And so they could see that they didn't have to adjust the data, and so they would grow confident about it. And I think that's a key lesson for us. And for anyone implementing automation or technology solutions, you can deliver the best solution, but you have to do it in a way in which you build confidence and belief.
So UI, of course, that's user interface. I mean, your point there is it's very hard to get people to change. Some statistics, you need to be 10 times better to get people to change system or device. But essentially what you're doing is sort of the equivalent of taking a typewriter and slipping a electronic keyboard in front of someone and saying, look, you're still doing the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's exactly, in fact, the beauty of it, it actually looks like a typewriter set of keys because it still feels the same. It looks the same. It's just that the data's there for you.
And then the reason I sort of mentioned cheating before was your point that you touched on at the end, which was you're automating. You're not saying you get this accuracy, but you have to have someone go and check it and correct the errors.
Yeah, we obviously we see others working in our space. Quite a common trick, if you like, is to say we've got this system which achieves high levels of accuracy, but they insist on putting a human on the front end to look at the document and go, is it likely our solution will actually be able to extract the data? And if they're not confident, it goes through the normal human path. But they only count the statistics for the stuff that's going through their system. So they're basically manipulating it. And I think my guidance to anybody, not just in insurance, but generally about document processing is, it takes time to train models to get to the level of accuracy that you want. And above all, it takes time for business leaders as well as business practitioners to grow confident that the solution is doing as good a job as they are.
And for the clever stuff that's going on with the tools you're using, what's the balance between what you're developing yourself versus where you're using third-party technology to view and extract the data?
Well, we're pretty much proprietary, where you will find us using other vendors' products, so something like Azure OCR. But we are also a very open architecture, so we're API in, API out, and API halfway along. So when you're extracting the data and you want to call out and get other data sources or test things, then you can do that. Our approach to generative AI is all of our clients, want to use typically OpenAI, but they want to do that within their own firewall, and they want the flexibility to use the models because things are changing so fast.
Yeah, and that space is moving so fast. I mean, you've got $100 billion to invest in building your own generative AI tool, which I think is the sort of the threshold these days.
I think there is a big debate, a big interest in small language models. Our approach is that the traditional AI and generative AI work best together. The one way of thinking about insurance tool is it's a bit like a brain, left brain, right brain. And I always get the wrong way around about which one is the creative side. But let's go left brain is using traditional AI with some generative AI, but mostly traditional AI techniques to emulate how humans speed read, for example, a 500-page contract. So it's recognizing the patterns that goes that a particular field that I want could be on page 3 or it could be page on 303, but it looks for the patterns, it finds it. And the advantage of that, which all of our clients are saying, is it's auditable because the data extracted and transformed is following a set path, and you can go back to why it is that data was extracted in that way. And in a regulated environment, that's very important. But what we can do and are doing is actually then providing generative AI solutions which do things like we started this podcast with summarisation. So we've got a very long paragraph here of a term within the policy, and we can apply pre-configured generative AI or leave it for the user in the workbench to ask questions and be creative in that way.
I mean, it's great to see that flexibility about growth. If you want to remember which way around they work, there's a great book if you're interested in drawing, or even if you want to see if you can draw, called "Drawing on the Right Hand Side of Your Brain" by Betty Edwards, and it's all about how to tap into that creative side. And it's actually pretty extraordinary about what we can achieve with drawing. If you're intrigued by that, anyway, we don't want to go off on a tangent.
I will. But no, thank you.
To touch on growth, though, so you're working in Marsh. I know you've got a few insurance carriers you're working with. You're starting to physically move out of the UK to work directly with the US. Can you sort of talk a little bit about what's happening as you now move beyond working for Marsh?
Well, actually, it's really quite interesting. The majority of our business is in North America. And in many ways, we're reverse engineering into the UK. Firstly, obviously, our starting point was Marsh, and we came to an agreement around the IP late last year. So we really launched insurance in full fettle in March. And that was, interestingly, with the support of Innovate UK, government support. And they sponsored us into Hertford InsurTech's symposium in March. And we actually launched there and got a huge amount of interest, a lot of traffic to the stand. And they've been supporting us here too. And so we're getting engaged with the Lloyd's markets and also in the service provider space. We've got a interesting alliance which we're hoping to announce at the upcoming ITC in Vegas. But we, again, with the sponsorship of the British High Commission, we are part of the InsurTech corridor to the East Coast. And we were delighted to receive Most Innovative Solution in Hertford, which claims to be the capital of insurance, last week.
No, congratulations. I mean, it is quite intriguing how many solutions are moving from the UK Lloyd's London market, where everything's a bit complicated and messy. And I know you've been servicing US carriers, but that ability to expand into the US we're seeing quite a lot of that. So yeah, really encouraging to see that's going that direction.
And they seem very, very welcoming, I think. And the other thing to think about, particularly if you're a smaller carrier or a smaller broker, is the opportunity to flow documents alongside the digital fingerprint, if you like, of those documents makes it much easier for you to do business. And so one of the conversations happening with the larger brokers in the US is that there are smaller carriers that they don't do a lot of business with. But if the smaller carrier was offering the digital data flow alongside their contracts, then I think that would encourage greater flow of business. We think there's plenty of opportunity for all of the players in the market.
Really interesting. So Mike, we covered a lot. I'm conscious it's Friday afternoon for you before we wrap up the week. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention, add into the discussion?
I think there's one thing, and it's sort of being parochial and very British, is the UK market or the kind of the Lloyd's market, where there's been a debate about standardizing data passing between brokers and carriers. And it's often referred to as Blueprint 2. And at its heart, it requires both brokers and carriers to transform their systems and their language. And I think that's very tough, very difficult. And I think what we offer by creating this standard data model is we can receive documents from carriers in the way in which they're currently constituted, extract the data and pass the data to the broker. So we can facilitate digital data interchange without the need for carriers or brokers to change their systems. And I think logically that is the quickest way of bringing transformation to the markets. And the same is true in the US. And I think that's where I see and where my ambition is for insurance is to step beyond bilateral contracts with a carrier or with a broker, but actually to look at how we can facilitate that data interchange in the market. And I think that's tremendously exciting. And certainly looking for brokers or carriers of any size that are interested in exploring it to work with us in a collaborative way, because these problems are solved through collaboration, not bilateral contracts.
Well, normally I ask you to summarize what people should remember about the discussion, but you've done it very eloquently there, Mike. I didn't even need to ask you, but I'm just going to summarize what you said anyway. I mean, my interpretation of what you said is that everyone's motivated to have better flow of information. Sometimes life can look a bit complicated with different standards. There are easier ways of doing this, and basically what you're offering with insurance is an easier way for everyone to communicate with each other without having to get constrained by data formats and standards.
That's correct. It's a bit like being the Google Translator of the commercial insurance market, or if you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Babelfish.
I think someone should name their business Babelfish one day. If Python's a code can be named after Monty Python, somebody surely can name something after the Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. So maybe that could be your next product, the Babelfish.
Exactly.
And then finally, Mike, we'd be delighted to get your support at InsTech. I'd love if you just were able to say a few words about, growing company, early stage. Every dollar you spend is important. What chose you to spend some of that with us?
Great people, a great network, events like this, and your regular events in London. I just find it's a non-threatening, informative, not biased community. And so really pleased to be part of it.
Well, thank you. No, we do try and be friendly and not threatening. And actually, that's quite an important thing. We don't know, and we welcome anybody, no matter how much you know or don't know. And then I guess finally, you mentioned ITC. You're going to be out in ITC. If anybody wants to see you there, what's the best way to track you down?
Yeah. Well, you can track me down on LinkedIn. We're in the broker zone. We've got a big stand in the broker zone. So come and find us. We're blue with a smattering of orange.
Color-coded sales. It's brilliant. So yeah, we'll put the links in the episode notes. Anybody wants to find you, Mike Hobday, under Insurance and Antworks. And yeah, good luck over there in that madness. I don't think it's 9,000 people now in ITC.
Apparently it is. And yeah, it's going to be busy. Anyway, thank you very much for your time today. It's been great.
No, thank you. It's absolutely fascinating. And I love that periodic table. So well done with that as well.
Thank you.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm sure you found this as fascinating as I did. But please do tell us what you think about this and any other podcasts you're listening to. You can track Matthew Grant down on LinkedIn or Robin Mertens, or you can email any of us, hello@instech.co. That's it, we are done.